Welcome to the tavern. Let's make a drink. Today we're making something called a Cobbler's Punch, and full disclosure, I'm not exactly completely excited about it. If I've never said this on the channel before, not all of these are going to be great, and have a feeling that this is going to be one of them. Now, a Cobbler's Punch is a little bit of a different take on an 18th century punch recipe. It is a punch for what I would call someone of the lower class, probably a punch for the poor. And you kind of get that for two reasons. Number one, it's called a Cobbler's Punch. A cobbler, although many people in the 21st century think that a cobbler is someone who makes shoes, is not someone who makes shoes. A cobbler is actually someone who fixes shoes, and it's not always something that's great. It's kind of seen as an impoverished profession in the time. Cobbling is literally putting things together from scrap, whereas cordwaining, the act of making shoes, is seen as a noble profession. So already you have a bit of a lower class connotation simply by the name of this drink. The next thing is that the ingredients that are showing up in this drink are not something you would see in a traditional punch that you would have someone of the middling or the higher classes drinking. So, Cobbler's Punch, as it's defined in Gross's Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, is simply vinegar, water, gin, and treacle. So, you are seeing the same four ingredients that you're seeing in a traditional punch. However, what's being made and put into them is not what you would normally see with a middling or a higher class drink. The sourness that would traditionally come from a citrus, from lemons, from limes, from oranges, something like that, instead is being substituted out with a cheap ingredient. They are using vinegar. The next thing you're seeing is water, which is fairly standard. Water is water. Then, instead of using sugar for your sweetener, you are using treacle. Treacle is a byproduct of the refining process, so it is the syrup that comes out as you're refining sugar. Now, despite what many people may tell you, treacle is not molasses. There are actually two products that are known as treacle. There is a light treacle and there is a dark treacle. Molasses is more like the dark treacle, but it's not the same thing. The lighter stuff today is known as golden syrup. You can find it in many supermarkets or you can order online. But then there is also a dark treacle, a black treacle, which you can still get as well. One thing I cannot stress enough: do not drink the dark treacle. Do not drink molasses. Again, it's not the same thing. They are a different product. But one thing that both black treacle and molasses have in common is that they have a high concentration of sulfates in them. So if you drink them, maybe nothing will happen, but maybe your stomach gets upset. Maybe you start puking. Maybe you have a headache. Don't drink it. It's fine if you bake it, it'll bake out, but if you drink it, totally different story. Use the golden syrup, or else you will truly get the low-class 18th century experience. The last thing that we're putting in this is our liquor. We are using gin instead of using rum. Gin is traditionally seen in the 18th century as a lower class type of hard alcohol. There is actually a gin epidemic that goes through London in the early 18th century, to the point that there are laws, there are gin acts put in place to try to stop the consumption of gin. William Hogarth paints a propaganda caricature called Gin Lane about all the terrible things that happen with gin. The reason for that, by the way, is because of a combination of acts being passed that allows the distillation of gin from pretty much anyone's home in the early part of the 18th century, and there are high tariffs on products that are coming in with barley, so other things that are being made are becoming more expensive. Gin in the 18th century is a bit different than gin today. You're not really going to find something that's exactly the same, but if you can find a traditional Old Tom gin, or even a less junipery London dry gin, that's about as close as you're going to get. We're not going to get 100% there, so we'll just kind of use a little bit of a mild flavor London dry gin to kind of get the effect of what this would taste like. Alright, so on to the drink mixing. We are going to follow a punch ratio as much as possible. We're going to augment it a little bit because I'm thinking that the typical ratio of citrus to everything else is going to be a little bit too much with that vinegar. So instead of having a 2-to-1 ratio of your citrus to your alcohol, we are going to use a 1-to-1, which you do see in a lot of 18th century punch recipes. So for this recipe, we are going to have 1.5 ounce of apple cider vinegar. I chose that because it's less harsh than other types of vinegar. It also shows up very commonly in the 18th century. And then we are going to do a 1-to-1 ratio of that, which is going to be 1.5 ounces of apple cider vinegar. We are also going to use 1.5 ounces of gin. We also will happen to be using 1.5 ounces of water to kind of match that ratio up as well. So in this cup right here, I have 1.5 ounces of cider vinegar and 1.5 ounces of water already pre-measured and poured. I'm going to put that into our mixer. The next thing we're going to get is 1.5 ounces of gin. I'm going to use a London Dry style. It's fairly not overly junipery. It's about as good as you're going to find. It's kind of just a nice balanced gin. Then I'm going to add 3/4 of an ounce of our treacle. So here's our golden syrup. We'll do 3/4 of an ounce of that. That is thick. That is very thick. Grab my mixing spoon here. All right. We're going to chill this, but I think we're going to stir it instead of shaking it. Let's get the true experience as much as we can. And we're going to give this a good stir to kind of chill it up. That does not smell good. All right, I think we'll good and stirred here. We'll pour it into this nice glass. If anything, at least we're drinking it out of good barware. Doesn't look terrible. Smells okay. All right, here we go. It's a little sour. So, yeah, you can definitely get the apple cider vinegar that comes through there. It's not overly boozy. You can't really taste the gin too much. It's a little sweet. You kind of get that. It's not awful. It's not great. Yeah, I mean, if you have not even 2 farthings to rub together, this will do it. But you know what? I'm not going to a fine establishment and ordering this. So yeah, try it out. Cobbler's Punch. Not great. Cheers.